Lovely to have everybody join us for today's session. I kind of like the music we just played right now, Gra Gra by Lagbaja. I think it's a song they should have played for Nnamdi Kanu today at the court. How he was just, talking and, telling the judge what the judge could do or couldn't do. Well, by the way, the news about that judgment is still filtering in. I've been following it for a bit, so I'm just taking a break right now so we can have this session. We're going to talk about it tomorrow. I wish him the best. I wish him luck, or whatever. Good luck. That's the word. I wish him good luck. Good. May God bless him. All right, may God bless everybody who has joined us today. Thank you very much for being here. If you're on TikTok, I know you've been enjoying the music. That was intentional. I wanted you to enjoy the music. However, I thought you'd be power tapping while enjoying the music. So please, let's do that now. We really need to get the likes up on TikTok. Thank you very much for your support. Please like the live and also share. This will help, help the algorithm push the live to the FYP, especially today, Thursday, when we're not coming on camera. It means that we require all the help we can get. So please, let's power tap and get the algorithm to push the live to the FYP. By the way, right now I just received the restriction prompt, which means, for some reason TikTok doesn't like pictures, but it will take on like that. But please, let's like the live. Thank you very much. If you're on YouTube, thank you very much for being here. Please like and share the live. Let's try and have the algorithm recommend the live stream to others as well. Thank you very much. Same goes for folks on Facebook. Thank you for being here. Please like the live and share as well. Just gonna wait for a bit while we do all of that. Like I said earlier, an interesting drama played out today. We haven't seen the end of it, and I think we're going to have more details in the next few hours. And so by tomorrow, we're going to have a full session. We're going to have a full understanding of what happened, and then we'll have a session on it during tomorrow's conversation. So please, let's power tap and share while we get set for today's session. Again, it's a Thursday, of course, you know that. So we're going to be listening to one of the sessions we've had. I mean, to be honest, it's actually about three recordings we're going to be putting together, today. That's because I wanted us, like I said yesterday, I wanted us to listen to a number of people talk about the same incident from their different perspectives, and I think that will help us to better appreciate the events of 1966 July, between July 28 and 29. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be listening to IBB, that's General Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida, Alhaji Shagari, Chief Anthony Enahoro, Ademoyega, and Danjuma. We're going to be listening to these generals and politicians and the officer Major Ademoyega talk about what happened, around that period, July 1966. So we'll play about 3 different videos on the matter, but they are short. By the time we put everything together, it's going to be about 40 minutes or so, and then we can discuss afterwards. All right. I want to also please remind us one more time, if you're on TikTok, thank you for being here. Please power tap. Thank you. Okay, these things help the live. All right, so I'm just going to read the description of one of these 3 videos. You know what, I think I should just read the 3 because the descriptions are not very long, so that will not be a problem at all. By the way, this stuff we're about to listen to, they are on the YouTube channel, Busui Oris on YouTube. It's called, the first one is Still Why Danjuma Reviews How the July Coounter Coup Happened. I think that will be the last thing we'll listen to, actually. The first we're going to listen to Omaje Ademoyega and IBB reveal what sparked the July 1966 counter coup. Shagari, Enahoro, and Ademoyega on Iran's moves in 1966. And then T.Y. Danjuma reveals how the July counter coup happened. T.Y. Danjuma gives a gripping account of how the July counter coup unfolded. He describes the tension in the barracks, the hurried whispers among officers, and the growing sense that the country was heading toward a turning point. His narration reveals a night filled with bold moves, quick decisions, and actions that reshaped Nigeria's history. Danjuma's story pulls you into the heat of the moment. You can almost feel the pressure that pushed the officers toward a path that will redefine the balance of power and deepen the turbulence of 1966. The one I had to read is Ademoyega IBB review was sparked the 1966 coup, counter coup. Ademoyega and Ibrahim Badamasi Babangida both paint a gripping picture of the tension that built up before the counter coup of July 1966. The accounts take us back to the first military takeover in January and the uneasy atmosphere that followed. Iran's governing style, the decrees that steered nationwide resentment, and the deep mistrust between Northern and Igbo officers all created a climate that was ready to explode. The pressure kept rising. Rumors traveled through the barracks. Friendships thinned out. Every decision was interpreted as a sign of danger. When things finally erupted, the country witnessed tragic killings and the loss of many Igbo lives across different regions. These events shaped the foundation of the conflicts that would follow and still shape our country's memory today. And then we're going to have the one we're opening with, which is Shagari, Enahoro, and Ademoyega on Iran's moves in 1966. We start with this because, that's the best way to understand the timelines, okay? Many Nigerians struggled to make sense of Iran's decisions after the January 1966 coup. In their writings, Shagari, Enahoro, and Ademoyega reveal how Decree 34 and a series of early moves hardened the belief that the coup had a deeper ethnic engine beneath it. One moment in particular stood out to them. 18 officers from one ethnic group rose through the ranks only 3 months after the coup. To many in the military, it felt like a signal. A new authority was taking shape, and the shape looked familiar. It was not the arrival of a single strong leader. It was the rise of a group that appeared to be setting the tone for the entire nation. The perspectives open a doorway into the tension of that era and help us understand why suspicion spread like wildfire. So we're going to start with this video and then we'll listen to the other two. But please, while you're listening, kindly put a tab if you're on TikTok. Click on the heart icon above the picture there and kindly join the team, drop a heart to me. Let's try and push this live together. And if you're on YouTube, thank you for being here. Please like the live. Also on Facebook, like and share. Thank you very much. So let's start with this video. It's called Shagari, Enahoro, and Ademoyega on Iran's moves in 1966. Enjoy. So it says, Iran declared intention on 20 July to rotate regional military governors on a 6-monthly basis to post military prefects to the provinces, and in a later announcement to rotate army battalions, which was curtly dismissed by the North, but rigorously applauded by the Southern press. Calm nonetheless prevailed, albeit an uneasy one. By now, however, the mood in the armed forces was far from tranquil. Northern army officers, and especially the other ranks, had become increasingly restive, even quasi-rebellious, over the January killings. Myth, fueled by wild rumors, which themselves were encouraged by official silence, developed around the allegedly miraculous circumstances in which the January victims succumbed to grief. Circumstances which rapidly transformed them into heroic figures. Moreover, Iran's failure to punish the January rebels and his conduct of national affairs, notably Decree number 34, reinforced the belief that all Igbo officers were party to the conspiracy. He says they reinforced the belief, but you know the funny thing, again, let me recommend the book. Why we struck by Ademoyega. And let me advise our folks from the Southeast who recommend that book every time. Please read the book before you recommend it. It's probably not the book that you should recommend if you read it. The truth of the matter is this. many of the Igbo officers who were supposed to have quelled the coup were actually in on it from the beginning. Whether it was Obienu or Majebu or Ojukwu or Erosi himself. And one of this, if we have time, I'm trying not to change the topic. We'll discuss what Obienu did and what Ojukwu did. These guys knew before the coup happened. They were intimated. They knew exactly what's up. And then they changed their minds. And this is important because when you read that book, what you live with is the fact that the more they try to hide away from the real issue, the more glaring it becomes that this was an ethnic coup. And that when he says that Decree number 34 reinforced the belief that all Igbo officers were party to the conspiracy, I cannot agree with him. If not all, maybe 90-something%, because everywhere you read, and you read one book like this, they'll tell you that it was this person that, destroyed the coup. Then you read other books, and it's called that person was actually part of the people that actually, either started it or actually knew about it before the thing was carried out. E.g., Obienu and Ojukwu, and you find it in the book by Ademoyega, Why We Struck. Obienu, Ojukwu, Adebo. With Yonsi, you're going to find that one in the book by Ilari Njoku, who, by the way, was the first head of Biafra military. He talked about how Yonsi knew about it before it happened. Okay, so we're reading now Shagari, and it's also important to note these things because while people are crying and deceiving themselves and say we didn't do anything, other people had something they were thinking and they knew exactly what happened, and they are not moved by whatever it is that people are saying now. Moreover, Ironsi's failure to punish the January rebels and his conduct of national affairs, notably Decree number 34, reinforced the belief that all Igbo officers were party to the conspiracy, nor were matters helped by the dramatic changes in the ethnic composition of the Army Officer Corps, which favored the Igbo in terms not only of numerical superiority, but seniority and control over command positions. For example, Igbo officers held 5 out of 12 command positions in January 1966, but by March, the number had risen to 10 out of 13. How now? We can't mindset be this. Five out of 12 became 10 out of 13. Again, of the 12 officers promoted Lieutenant Colonel in May, 8 were Igbo and only 1 a Northerner. You should be thankful now, there was no Yoruba at all. These may not have been ethically motivated, but the result was inevitably the same. I want to read something to you from Enahoro 1966 Addis Ababa speech. Why is it that some people are not trusted? By the way, if you think this is just no, it's not. Sorry, if you think it's just history, no, it's not. We read the report of what happened in Anambra State recently when the federal government institution in Anambra State that recruited less than 100 people had 811 from Anambra State. 811, then 65 from Enugu. It is what it is. I want to read something to you. Just give me a second, please. Okay, let's start with Enahoro. All right. Let's go to Crisis and Conflict in Nigeria, Volume 2. So I'm reading Enahoro's speech, 12 August 1968. Historians will continue to debate whether what happened in Nigeria on 15th January 1966 was a rebellion, a coup, or a mutiny. Whatever it was, there was a change of government. The civilian administration was removed from office. In the morning of that date, the Prime Minister of the Federation, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, the Federal Minister of Finance, Chief F. Okotebo, the Premier of the Northern Region, Sir Ahmadu Bello, the Premier of the Western Region, Chief Akintola, the second and third ranking officers in the Nigerian Army, Brigadier Malari and Brigadier Ademoyega, other senior officers, Colonel Shodainde, Colonel Palm and others, were seized and murdered. All of them had one thing in common: they were not Igbos. The Premier of the Eastern Region, Dr. Michael Okpara, the Premier of the Midwest Region, Chief Dennis Osadebe, the head of the Army, Major General Aguiyi Ironsi, the Federal Minister of Trade, Dr. K.O. Mbadiwe, and others in like position were not killed. They had one thing in common: they were Igbos. However, in the morning of the fateful date, and for some time afterwards, these facts were not generally known in the country. Major General Aguiyi Ironsi established a federal military government after January 15. He promised to restore law and order, to put down what he described as a mutiny, to deal with corruption, and to restore civilian rule as soon as practicable. In assessing the motives as well as the consequences of the military coup of 15th January 1966, attention should be drawn to the various interpretations and excuses offered. Firstly, some people saw in it an attempt to end northern domination. Secondly, some regarded it as an attempt to remove corruption in government. Thirdly, others hoped it would introduce an honest and just program of political and administrative reform to correct the structural imbalance in the Federation. No one quarreled with these aims. Consequently, there was an atmosphere of general relief immediately after the coup of 15th January until the pattern of killings which emerged when the dust had cleared revealed that this was a coup organized by young Igbo officers in the army. Whatever they may claim was their basic plan, its effect was that civilian leaders and senior military officers from other areas and ethnic groups were killed, while those from Igbo areas were spared. All non-Igbo senior military officers above the rank of major who were accessible were killed in the January 15 coup. There was only one exception to this, when a junior Igbo officer, half awake through his midnight sleep, was killed in Apapa for refusing to hand over the key to the armory. Therefore, to most Nigerians, the incident of 15 January were a clumsily camouflaged attempt to secure Igbo domination of the government of the country. This impression was later reinforced by certain appointments and actions of the new regime under Major General Ironsi, himself an Igbo. The opportunities of January 15 were misused in several ways by the Ironsi regime in the month that followed. For a while, every Nigerian hoped that the country would go on to achieve greater progress in its development generally. Unfortunately, General Ironsi allowed matters to be taken out of his hands by prominent Igbo leaders in the army, in the public service, and in public life. Affairs in the public service and the armed forces appeared to lend color to the impression that the coup of January 15 was designed to install Igbos in positions of power. Out of 21 promotions in the army in April 1966, for example, 18 were Igbo officers. General Ironsi drew his principal advisors from the Igbo ethnic group. Ethnic groups tend to be chauvinistic, but the Igbos were the most militantly chauvinistic, and this naturally created apprehensions in the minds of the others. That's from Anthony Enahoro, his speech at Addis Ababa, 12 August 1968. So he mentioned something about the appointments. 18 of 21 were Igbo. That's also corroborated by Ademoyega in his book, Why We Struck. Let's go on. So going back to the book by Shagari, Beckon to Serve, he says, now were matters held by the dramatic changes in the ethnic composition of the Army Officer Corps, which favored the Igbo in terms not only of numerical superiority but seniority. Someone says 18 out of 21. Let me tell you something. Even the three that they put, they only put that one to, in a way, communicate to the north that don't feel bad, like we're also here for you. So the way it was is that those three who were from the north, who were promoted, were taking ahead or over their superiors who were Yoruba, 5 of them. They bypassed those ones and brought the North over. Added those 3 to the 18 that they wanted to actually promote, even 21. This was in April. 3 months. Mostly applauded by the Southern press. Calm. Let's go back to the book now.
So it's the timely moment for us.
So he says, he also declared intention on 20 July to rotate regional military governors on a 6-monthly basis to post military prefects to the provinces, and in a later announcement to rotate army battalions, which was curtly dismissed by the North, but rigorously applauded by the Southern press. Calm nonetheless prevailed, albeit an uneasy one. By now, however, the mood in the armed forces was far from tranquil. Northern army officers, and especially the other ranks, had become increasingly restive, even quasi-rebellious, over the January killings. Myth, fueled by wild rumors, which themselves were encouraged by official silence, developed around the allegedly miraculous circumstances in which the January victims succumbed to grief. Circumstances which rapidly transformed them into heroic figures. Moreover, Ironsi's failure to punish the January rebels and his conduct of national affairs, notably Decree number 34, reinforced the belief that all Igbo officers were party to the conspiracy. He says he reinforced the belief, but you know this funny thing. Again, let me recommend the book. Why we struck by Ademoyega. And let me advise our folks from the Southeast who recommend that book every time. Please read the book before you recommend it. It's probably not a book that you should recommend if you read it. The truth of the matter is this. Many of the Igbo officers who were supposed to have quelled the coup were actually in on it from the beginning. Whether it was Obienu, or Madebo, or Ojuku, or Ironsi himself. And one of this, if we have time, I'm trying not to change the topic. We'll discuss what Obienu did and what Ojuku did. These guys knew before the coup happened. They were intimated. They knew exactly what's up. And then they changed their minds. And this is important because when you read that book, what you live with is the fact that the more they try to hide away from the real issue, the more glaring it becomes that this was an ethnic coup. And that when he says that Decree number 34 reinforced the belief that all Igbo officers were party to the conspiracy, I cannot agree with him. If not all, maybe 90-something%, because everywhere you read, and you read one book like this, it'll tell you that it was this person that, destroyed the coup. Then you read other books, and it's called that person was actually part of the people that actually, either started it or actually knew about it before the thing was carried out. E.g., Obienu and Ojuku, and you find it in the book by Ademoyega, Why We Struck. Obienu, Ojuku, Madebo. With Ironsi, you're going to find that one in the book by Ilari Njoku, who, by the way, was the first head of Biafra military. He talked about how Ironsi knew about it before it happened. Okay, so we're reading now Shagari, and it's also important to note these things because while people are crying and deceiving themselves and say we didn't do anything, no. Other people had something they were thinking and they knew exactly what happened, and they are not moved by, whatever it is that people are saying now. Moreover, Ironsi's failure to punish the January rebels and his conduct of national affairs, notably Decree number 34, nor were matters helped by the dramatic changes in the ethnic composition of the Army Officer Corps, which favored the Igbo in terms not only of numerical superiority, but seniority and control over command positions. For example, Igbo officers held 5 out of 12 command positions in January 1966, but by March, the number had risen to 10 out of 13. How now? We can't mindset be this. 5 out of 12 became 10 out of 13. Again, of the 12 officers promoted Lieutenant Colonel in May, 8 were Igbo and only 1 a Northerner. You should be thankful now, there was no Yoruba at all. This may not have been ethically motivated, but the result was inevitably the same. I want to read something to you from Enahoro 1966 Addis Ababa speech. Why is it that some people are not trusted? By the way, if you think this is just recently, no, it's not. No, it's not. Sorry, if you think it's just history, no, it's not. We read the report of what happened in Anambra State recently when a federal government institution in Anambra State that recruited less than 100 people had 811 from Anambra State. 811, then 65 from Enugu. It is what it is. I want to read something to you. Just give me a second, please. Okay, let's start with Enahoro. All right. Let's go to Crisis and Conflict in Nigeria, Volume 2. So I'm reading Enahoro's speech, 12 August 1968. Historians will continue to debate whether what happened in Nigeria on 15th January 1966 was a rebellion, a coup, or a mutiny. Whatever it was, there was a change of government. The civilian administration was removed from office. In the morning of that date, the Prime Minister of the Federation, Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, the Federal Minister of Finance, Chief Ẹkáàbọ, the Premier of the Northern Region, Sir Ahmadu Bello, the Premier of the Western Region, Chief Akintola, the second and third ranking officers in the Nigerian Army, Brigadier Malari and Brigadier Ademoyega, other senior officers, Colonel Shodainde, Colonel Palm and others, were seized and murdered. All of them had one thing in common: they were not Igbos. The Premier of the Eastern Region, Dr. Michael Opara, the Premier of the Midwest Region, Chief Dennis Osadebe, the head of the Army, Major General Agui, the Federal Minister of Trade, Dr. Keom Badiwe, and others in like position were not killed. They had one thing in common: they were Igbos. However, in the morning of the fateful date, and for some time afterwards, these facts were not generally known in the country. Major General Agui established a federal military government after January 15. He promised to restore law and order, to put down what he described as a mutiny, to deal with corruption, and to restore civilian rule as soon as practicable. In assessing the motives as well as the consequences of the military coup of 15th January 1966, attention should be drawn to the various interpretations and excuses offered. Firstly, some people saw in it an attempt to end northern domination. Secondly, some regarded it as an attempt to remove corruption in government. Thirdly, others hoped it would introduce an honest and just program of political and administrative reform to correct the structural imbalance in the Federation. No one quarreled with these aims. Consequently, there was an atmosphere of general relief immediately after the coup of 15th January until the pattern of killings which emerged when the dust had cleared revealed that this was a coup organized by young Igbo officers in the army. Whatever they may claim was their basic plan, its effect was that civilian leaders and senior military officers from other areas and ethnic groups were killed, while those from Igbo areas were spared. All non-Igbo senior military officers above the rank of major who were accessible were killed in the January 15 coup. There was only one exception to this, when a junior Igbo officer halfway through his midnight sleep was killed in Apapa for refusing to hand over the key to the armory. Therefore, to most Nigerians, the incident of 15 January were a clumsily camouflaged attempt to secure Igbo domination of the government of the country. This impression was later reinforced by certain appointments and actions of the new regime under Major General Ironsi, himself an Igbo. The opportunities of January 15 were misused in several ways by the Ironsi regime in the month that followed. For a while, every Nigerian hoped that the country would go on to achieve greater progress in its development generally. Unfortunately, General Ironsi allowed matters to be taken out of his hands by prominent Igbo leaders in the army, in the public service, and in public life. Affairs in the public service and the armed forces appeared to lend color to the impression that the coup of January 15 was designed to install Igbos in positions of power. Out of 21 promotions in the army in April 1966, for example, 18 were Igbo officers. General Ironsi drew his principal advisors from the Igbo ethnic group. Ethnic groups tend to be chauvinistic, but the Igbos were the most militantly chauvinistic, and this naturally created apprehensions in the minds of the others. That's from Anthony Enahoro, his speech at Addis Ababa, 12th August 1968. So he mentioned something about the appointments. 18 of 21 were Igbo. That's also corroborated by Ademoyega in his book, Why We Struck. Let's go on. So we're going back to the book by Shagari, Beckoned to Serve. He says, "Nor were matters held by the dramatic changes in the ethnic composition of the Army Officer Corps, which favored the Igbo in terms not only of numerical superiority but seniority." Someone says 18 out of 21. Let me tell you something. Even the three that they put, they only put that one to, in a way, communicate to the North that don't feel bad, like we're also here for you. So the way it was is that those three who were from the North, who were promoted, were taking ahead or over their superiors who were Yoruba, 5 of them. They bypassed those ones and brought the North over. Added those 3 to the 18 that they wanted to actually promote, even 21. This was in April. 3 months. With us, you know that sometimes you may. Okay, so if you're reading the main text, I'm keeping you. Okay, so if you're reading the main text, like I said, we're all, if you've been with us, you know that sometimes you may visit other books just to get clarity. Hello everyone. So I just noticed that we listened to one part twice. I apologize for that. I'm just going to I want to quickly look for the other one so that we don't make that mistake again. Okay, so the next one will be Ademoyega and IBB reveal what sparked the July 1966 counter coup, and then that'll be followed by T.Y. Danjuma reveals how the July counter coup happened. Okay, so first we'll listen to Ademoyega and IBB sparked. Ademoyega and IBB reveal what sparked the July 1966 counter coup. Take a listen, please. Thank you. Ademoyega, I think is also quite interesting. Oh, this is something from Ademoyega. I think is also quite interesting. Nocturnal safety flight. While Ironsi was thus fully engaged with his nocturnal safety flight, he had little time to consider the safety of the nation, which he had taken upon himself to govern. It happened that even detainees knew it well in advance that Nigeria was being wetted with petrol for a terrible conflagration, while the commander of the nation, who lived in his armored tower, knew nothing about the wetting and did nothing at all to prevent the burning. Nonetheless, if Ironsi had no time, how about his co-reactionaries and co-revisionists, men like Ojukwu, Amadebo, and Igboba, who helped him to destroy and get a quick and neat end to Nzogu's revolution? If they knew of the wetting, what did they do to prevent the burning? Perhaps, like Madebo, they all rushed to the Supreme Commander requesting him to, quote-unquote, command the wetting so that it could dry up and disappear. And when they saw that he failed so to command it, what did they do to prevent the conflagration? Nothing. They did something, of course. They tried to save their own heads, while the inferno engulfed thousands of their own type, who had placed their trust in them for protection. If the truth must be spoken, Ironsi had implicit faith in his own type of Nigerians, the non-revolutionary and the reactionary type of Easterners and Midwest Igbos, Therefore, as soon as he had taken over the reins of power, he promoted more than a dozen and a half of them from major to lieutenant colonel and gave them all the senior and sensitive positions in the army and air force. By the way, I'm reading why we struck by Ademoyega. Apart from this, only three others. In fact, let me go back just a bit. That's what I was. Therefore, as soon as he had taken over the reins of power, he promoted more than a dozen and a half of them from major to lieutenant colonel and gave them all the senior and sensitive positions in the army and air force. Apart from this, only three others were promoted from major to lieutenant colonel, and those three were Northerners. Their promotion stemmed from the guilt of Ironsi and his ill-conceived notion of placating the Northerners. But in so promoting the Northern officers, he jumped over the heads of 5 Yoruba officers whom he did not care for, thus giving people the impression that the coup was designed and executed to achieve and promote Igbo domination of Nigeria. That's why I said, when they tell you to read this book, please read the book. The clowns telling you to read it have not read the book themselves. They think it's something to make them happy. It actually tells us what really happened. Again, by so doing, he alienated the relatively few senior Yoruba officers who also needed to be placated if placation was necessary for the Northerners. In this way, he separated the Easterners and the Midwest Igbos from the remainder of the officers of the armed forces. Therefore, in the trouble that followed, the Ironsis type did not receive the sympathy of the others. To the utter disappointment and chagrin of Ironsi, his strategic officers did nothing to save the nation from the impending doom. Even though they saw it plainly coming, they stayed put, each one expecting a command from the Supreme Commander until the doom came. I'm going to jump what happened in... So it happened that on May 29, fire swept through many cities of northern So it happened that on May 29, fire swept through many cities of northern Nigeria, taking tolls on thousands of Nigerian citizens, not only Igbos, but also on Yorubas, Efiks, Anangs, Ijos, and so on. The fire was let loose by the machinations of the NPC politicians, the derelicts of the NPC oligarchy that had been swept out of office on that January 15. They claimed that the riots were a practical protest against the over-centralization of the government by the Decree 34 of May 24, 1996. I'm going to jump to this other part. Having said that much, let me return to the Ironsi regime. The regime rode in upon the crest of popularity that greeted the coup. In the eyes of the average Nigerian, the army was a reputable institution which had earned laurels for itself abroad during its services with the United Nations in the Congo. At home, it had remained more or less sacrosanct, untouched by the notoriety that had plagued many public institutions. On ceremonial occasions, it had appeared immaculate and extra-disciplined. In internal security operations, it had appeared impartial and unsullied by the corruption of the politicians. When it turned out to save the country from disintegration on January 15, the whole country gave a sigh of salvation and hope. Another important point was that we removed the politicians because we were convinced that they were evil. We did not favor any side. We did not seek to wear the garb of any political party. This we knew for sure. Ironsi, on the other hand, surrounded himself with a particular tribe and chose the political policies of a particular party. That tribe was the Igbo, and the party was the NCNC. He could not see that this kind of situation called for the balancing of ideas, principles, and personalities. I'm reading the book by Ademoyega, Why We Struck. I'll start again. Another important point was that we removed the politicians because we were convinced that they were evil. We did not favor any side and chose the political policies of a particular party. The tribe was the Igbo and the party was the NCNC. He could not see that this kind of situation called for the balancing of ideas, principles, and personalities. Just as the Balewa government of the NPC blindly and exclusively pursued the policies and principles of the NPC oligarchy, so did the Ironsi, now in the saddle of power, blindly and exclusively pursued the policies and principles of the NCNC elite, including Unification Decree. This made utter nonsense of the military takeover, and the people did not delay to tell him so. The idea of unifying the nation and abrogating federalism was the work of Ironsi and his ill-motivated advisors. It had nothing at all to do with the aspirations of the revolution of January 15. I say this most emphatically because I formulated the principles and policies of the revolution together with Nzogo in those months that we lived together in the north. Even Major Lawson of the Nigerian Army, electrical and mechanical engineers, came to ask me quietly in August 65 August 1965, if I actually agreed with the revolutionary ideas being expressed by Nzogu, I told him that I did not merely agree, I formulated those ideas together with him. If Ironsi's advisors, many of whom are still alive today, were really nationalistic or even rational and politically healthy, as they claimed they were, why was it that they did not advise Ironsi to release Chief Awolowo, Enahoro, Jakonde, and other political prisoners of the Balewa government? If he had done that, the West and Midwest would have identified with his regime. Instead, he sought for and got only the approval of the Easterners and the Igbos of the Midwest. This particular point he did clearly dramatize by his partisan approach to promotions and appointments, both in the civil service as well as in the military services. Finally, how did anybody aspire to rule a nation without politics? If Ironsi had succeeded in doing so, he would have been a precedent. The January 15 revolutionaries would never have ruled this nation without politics. From the outset, we could have organized our own mass movement, which would have clearly defined our ideologies and publicized them and propagated them successfully. A similar thing had worked and stabilized the military government of Egypt right from 1952 to this day, 1981. So much for Ironsi's shortcomings. How did he meet his Waterloo? Very simply, having been scared to death by the May riots, he summoned the natural rulers, quote-unquote, from every part of the country and told them that his measures to knock the country into one was temporary and that he meant to govern through constant consultation with them. Like the old soldier that he was, he recalled that such a system worked very well under Lord Lugard. Jesus is Lord. Are you a colonizer? Let me go back a bit. Like the old soldier that he was, he recalled that such a system worked very well under Lord Lugard from 1914 to 1920. He, Ironsi, had not yet returned to Nigeria from Burma in 1946, and therefore was not aware that the system had broken down that year. The quote-unquote natural rulers naturally agreed. While they started toasting themselves and swearing to be brothers in arms, the soldiers in their barracks were cleaning their weapons and filling their ammunition pouches to bring Ironsi's misrulership to an end. Thus, by about 1800 hours in 6 p.m., in certain military units, perhaps not in all of the South, some Igbo officers and NCOs distributed weapons among themselves in preparation, as they themselves later explained, to counter any move by the northern officers and men to stage their own coup against Ironsi. From available information, this happened in the military hospital Yaba and possibly in the garrison at Abeokuta. At that time, the Yaba hospital was the exclusive preserve of Southerners, so the irregular distribution of arms did not spark off any reaction. But apparently in Abeokuta, it did. So the northern group saw this as the opportunity that they had been waiting for. Ironsi and his host, Lieutenant Colonel Fajri, the military governor of the West, were both arrested by Major Danjuma and his accomplices. They removed the arrested leaders to a nearby bush, tortured them and shot them. It was a dramatic end of the regime of deceit, bad faith, ambivalence, misdirection, and misrulership. Ironsi's regime was a colossal failure. I'm going to read from IBB's book, A Journey in Service. There was also a rumored plan to swap the 1st and 4th battalions and rotate the military governors to the different regions. We read that already in the book by Shagari. These rumors were amplified by stories of some Igbos gloating over the January killings. This is IBB's book, the one that I said we should go and read. I don't know, people just do funny things. These rumors were amplified by stories of some Igbos gloating over the January killings. Contrary to a promise given after the coup was quashed that the coup plotters would be tried, none was ever brought to trial, although some were detained. On the contrary, a few of the coup plotters were promoted. These confirmed rumors that an Igbo domination of national affairs was in the works. Meanwhile, the role of disgruntled northern civilian propagandists and politicians picked up more steam. They deployed a combination of incitement and swirling rumors as psychological warfare to northern soldiers to retaliate for the killings of January 15. Many civilian leaders kept hammering that we were cowards for not avenging the death of our leaders, just like Shagari, said in his book. The view is supported by General Gowon's recollections of the Army's official history of those years. General Gowon said, quote, "The northern politicians infiltrated the northern soldiers and officers, trying to convince them that there was a need for them to retaliate," end of quote. Unfortunately, Some of the decisions of the Central Command in Lagos fed into the fears of those who suspected imminent sectional domination. Read Igbo domination. For instance, in late May, the General Aguiyi-Ironsi-led federal government was convinced that the best way to unify the country was to issue the Unification Decree number 34 of 1966, abolishing and replacing the regions with a group of 35 provinces. That decree also unified the civil services. Decree 34 was a significant disadvantage to northern Nigeria, considering its inadequacy in human resources. This further fueled the fears of a southern domination of northern Nigeria. There is no southern domination of northern Nigeria. There is an Igbo domination of the entire Nigeria, as said by Igbo people themselves. I don't know. When you just be specific, just you will say Igbo, then you will say southern, then you will say Igbo. No, it's Igbo. It's not even Eastern. It is what it is. No bad feelings. Nobody is fighting, but that's what happened. It was an Igbo thing. Let's continue reading. Where were we? Unfortunately, some of the decisions of the Central Command in Lagos fed into the fears of those who suspected imminent sectional domination. For instance, in late May, the General Aguiyi-Ironsi-led federal government was convinced that the best way to unify the country was to issue the Unification Decree number 34 of 1966, abolishing and replacing the regions with a group of 35 provinces. That decree also unified the civil services. In other words, we had Western Civil Service, Western Region, Eastern Region, Midwest, and the North. And of course, Lagos separately, because it was federal. They now put everything together, so you can just move anybody anyhow, because why? You are Yoga. That was what these guys were planning to do. So they abolished the regions and replaced them with 35 provinces. That decree also unified the civil services. Decree 34 was a significant disadvantage to northern Nigeria, considering its inadequacy in human resources. This further fueled the fears of a southern domination of northern Nigeria and subsequently the entire country. Whether these fears of power domination were unfounded or not, it was clear that something was about to give from the sequence of cascading events. Unfortunately, the near collapse of the age-long tradition of military discipline during this period did not help matters. Embittered by the events of January 15, many young officers, particularly non-commissioned NCOs of Northern Nigerian extraction, became unmanageable. Many of them refused outright to take orders from their superiors. And in an army where most of the infantry were Northerners, that constituted a real problem. Suddenly, there was a rush of mutinies in different army formations in the country. There was, for instance, the case of the 4th Battalion in Ibadan, where Northern officers refused to take orders from Major M.O. Zevili, who was second in command at the battalion, replaced Lieutenant Colonel Abogo Lagema, who was murdered in Lagos during the January coup attempt, and even after another Northern Chief Officer, Major Joe Akahan, replaced Nzevili, the Northern officers remained restive. Similar scenarios played out in other parts of the country. By now, rumors of an imminent upheaval were so widespread, you knew it was a question of time before we had a disastrous national crisis. On July 28, 1966, things came to a head, and what has come to be known as the Coounter Coup of 1966 in Nigerian military history began. The commanding officer of the Abeokuta garrison, Lieutenant Colonel Gabriel Okonweze, called a meeting of the rank and file of the garrison to douse the rumors of another coup. Unfortunately, agitated and aggrieved junior Northern officers who erroneously believed that the meeting was convened to complete the terrible killings begun during the January coup by Igbo officers burst into the forum, instantly killing Lieutenant Colonel Okonweze and the commander of the Risk Squadron, Major John Obieno. Lieutenant A. Orok, who drove in from town and stumbled on the situation, was also gunned down, oblivious of the goings-on. Orok, by the way, was Efik, not Igbo. Later that night, other officers of Igbo extraction in and around the garrison were identified and killed after a door-to-door search. The killings quickly spread to Ibadan and Lagos. Captain Okoye, who was in transit at the Ikeja airport in Lagos, was arrested and killed. In Ibadan, hostile troops surrounded the state house at Agodi, where General Ironsi, the state military governor, Lieutenant Colonel Francis Adekunle Fajuyi, and the 2nd Brigade Commander, Lieutenant Colonel Hilarion Joku, were located. The hostile troops abducted Ironsi, Fajuyi, and Ironsi's Air Force ATC, Captain Andrew Nwankwo. Ironsi and Faji were later killed. However, Nwankwo managed to escape. The killings continued in Kaduna. The first victim was the commander of the Kaduna-based 3rd Battalion, Lieutenant Colonel Israel Okoro. His death in Kaduna was followed by that of the commander of the 2nd Risk Squadron, Major Isong. In Kano, the situation seemed initially under control until the troops mutinied, leading to the death of many Igbo civilians in Kano. Apparently, what started as an attack on Igbo officers became an attack on Igbo civilians and officers alike. Unfortunately, the violence got out of control and spread to parts of Bauchi, Sokoto, Katsina, and Zaria. Hundreds of Igbos died between Sunday, May 29 and Sunday, June 5, 1966. So this book is called Ironsi by Chuks Logbonam. He reproduced an interview that was granted in 2008 by T.Y. Danjuma. I'm just going to read the interview. It says, what happened was that after we arrested him, I lost control. He's talking about Ironsi. I stayed in the barracks with the adjutant, the chief of staff of the commanding officer. I stayed with him in a single officer quarters, and it was there that at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, I was in bed when he came and knocked at my door. He said, "Sir, do you know what has happened?" I said, "No." He said there was some trouble in Abeokuta. He said there was an Igbo officer holding a secret meeting with all the Igbo officers in the officers' mess, and our boys went and shot all of them. What we're reading here is exactly what we read in Crisis and Conflict in Nigeria by A.H.M. Green earlier. We're talking about the phone call, and also in IBB's book, Johnny in Service, where they attacked, those Igbo officers. So he says there was an Igbo officer holding a secret meeting with all the Igbo officers in the officers' mess, and our boys went and shot all of them. Who are our boys, quote unquote? Northern soldiers. Remember, Igbos did the killings that took place in January 1966. They killed non-Igbo senior army officers. Only one Igbo officer was killed, but Igbo wiped out almost all the senior non-Igbo officers. We rounded up all the people who did the killings because we all helped Ironsi to abort the January coup. They were rounded up and put in jail where they were being paid their full salary. They had television. They had everything there despite being detained, and nobody was talking about court-martialing them. Nobody was talking about court-martialing them. Instead, the newspapers, including the Daily Times, wrote to the effect that the boys being detained were national heroes. National heroes because they killed corrupt politicians. You didn't see anything about army officers. They killed corrupt politicians and replaced them with Ironsi, whom we would call Ironside. In other words, they killed corrupt politicians. How about the soldiers? They killed the soldiers because there would be threats to Ironsi. He was an Igbo coup designed to do two things: either to have an Igbo civilian to become prime minister in the person of King Badiwe, or to have an Igbo military officer or the GOC become the head of state in the person of Ironsi. So if you were corrupt and you killed the politicians, why do you have to kill the officers? You already know the answer to that. He didn't say, so he says the national heroes because they killed corrupt politicians. He didn't say anything about army officers. They killed corrupt politicians and replaced them with Ironsi, whom we would call Ironside. Very insulting and, in my own opinion, provocative. They were saying that those boys should be freed. Tensions started building. Riots broke out in the north, and it was because of the riots that broke out in the north that Ironsi started going around to talk to traditional rulers and the army leaders. I was in his convoy. We got to Ibadan. We had a meeting with traditional rulers and leaders of thought, at the end of which everybody was asked to sing the national anthem. It's funny that every single book you read about 28, they all mention the national anthem. It's interesting. All right, we all sang the national anthem. In the night, we had dinner and we came back. We dropped him, Ironsi, at Government House and then went to the barracks to stay with the adjutant. Then at 1 o'clock in the night, there was bang, bang, bang on my door. I said, what happened? He, adjutant, said there was some trouble in Abeokuta. I said, what was it? He said the man on duty officer, saw the commanding officer holding meetings in the officers' mess. All the officers that attended that meeting were Igbos. They left out non-Igbo officers. The duty officer called 1 or 2 soldiers. They cocked their guns, went there and rounded up everybody. They thought it was a joke. One of them had his staff machine gun by his side, and he bent down and attempted to pick it up. They opened up on him and shot him down. They sprayed everybody, killed everybody there, and started telephoning. They rang Ibadan. It was then that this boy woke me up. This was what happened. The press had been calling for the release of the January coup plotters. Now, our boys have created an excuse for the release. After killing these people, it is a draw. They killed army officers in Lagos and all over Nigeria. Igbos did it. Now, Igbos had been killed in Abeokuta. That would be the end of it. I said no. I asked the adjutant, who was in a position to know if the Supreme Commander at that time, Ironsi, was known as Supreme Commander, if he had been told. He said no, he didn't think so. I said, okay, you should get me some soldiers. He brought soldiers. I didn't come to Ibadan with combat dress. I had to borrow the combat dress of an officer about my size. It was an American combat dress. This officer had just come back from the US. You know, when you travel with the head of state, you have to dress decently, wear service dress and so on. So I borrowed fatigue, wore it. In fact, I wore it over my pajamas and left to the adjutant. I said, take me to the government house. We got there. We asked soldiers who were on duty to ground arms. They all grounded their arms. I told the adjutant what to do. Soldiers grounded their arms, we disarmed them and armed the soldiers that we brought. Meanwhile, the anti-tank gun, Ironsi convoy, was there. The commander was there. The commander was from the garrison in Ibadan. We knew him. See why Danjuma responded. We wanted to arrest him, that's Ironsi. We wanted to arrest him alive and go and lock him up. We wanted to interrogate him to find out the role he played in the coup, January 1966. His stories didn't add up about how he escaped from Flagstaff House, where he was staying at number 1 Glover, Ikoyi, and ended up in Ikeja. Who knows how he escaped? You want to know how he escaped? You have to read Nigeria's 5 Majors by Ben Bule. He escaped because a man from his hometown, who was part of the coup plotters, called him Okafor and Oji. They told him before they got to the house. They're just deceiving everybody. So they said they don't know how he moved from Ikoyi, from Glover Ikoyi, and suddenly disappeared there and reappeared in Ikeja. Anyway, let's continue. His stories didn't add up about how he escaped from Flagstaff House, where he was staying at number 1 Glover Ikoyi, and ended up in Ikeja. How it came about that Njoku, who was supposed to have handed over the command of the largest garrison in Lagos, which was then the Ikeja garrison, did not hand over. Njoku was still in command, and he, Ironsi, went to join him. We were going to interrogate him about all those, or at least that was what I thought we were going to do. So everything I told the soldiers to do or not to do, they obeyed until eventually, first, Adekunle Fajri, military governor of Western Region, came out of the building after he waited. Every time they sent somebody out of the building, nobody went back. So Fajri came down. As he came down the steps, I saluted him and said, "Sir, you are under arrest. Hands up." He looked at me and called me, "Danjuma." I said, "Sir, you are under arrest." He raised his hands and came down. He said, "What do you want?" I said, "We want to arrest you and we want to arrest the head of state." He said, "And you are going out with him?" I said, "Yes." And then the interviewer asked, "And you were supposed to be on the Supreme Commander's entourage?" See why Danjuma responds, I was there. I went to Ibadan with him. What do you mean by supposed to? Then the interviewer said, "Because you were now arresting." See why Danjuma responds, "Yes, I was arresting." He, Fajri, pleaded with me not to go up with armed men, that he was going to go up and call him, Ironsi, provided I guaranteed his safety. I gave him my guarantee. I said, quote unquote, "I guarantee your safety." He went there and didn't come down, so I decided to climb up. As I climbed up the steps, armed soldiers followed me. I had a grenade in my hand. I didn't have any arm. As I came, Ironsi was seated. Faji was by his side. I said, "Sir, you are under arrest." And I gave him the order to stand up. Reluctantly, Ironsi stood up. He used to carry a staffed crocodile. He had it in his hand. They both came down. Faji was still asking me about guaranteeing my safety. I guaranteed his safety absolutely. So we came out of the building, down toward the car. One of the soldiers said we shouldn't allow him to carry his crocodile, that there's juju. I said, no, there's nothing in it. He said it would disappear if we allowed him to carry it. He started to stop, and I told him to shut up. That was the time I lost control. The soldier battened me and pushed me aside and took charge. To my greatest surprise, the adjutant, who was, these were his troops. I was a stranger. They were obeying me because everything I did, they liked. They liked what I was doing, but the moment I told them not to do something they didn't like, they rejected. I expected the adjutant who was there to intervene. He probably incited them. He said, yes, the soldier is right. This thing here, that's Ironsi's crocodile, is his Zasa. It's juju that will make him disappear. When you say crocodile, it's not like a real crocodile, it's a staff. Right? But it looks like crocodile. Like a stick is always carrying all over the place. It's juju that will make him disappear. So they took the thing from him, pushed him aside, and bundled him and Fajui in a vehicle and drove away. It was 6 o'clock in the morning. The front of the government house was littered with people without shoes, people who had come to get ready to go. They asked every one of them to sit on the floor, and they removed their shoes. They all sat down, including the head of service, Chief P. Odumosu. I came down. They, the soldiers, drove away. There was nobody to tell these people to go, so they all sat there. It was I who said, what are you people still doing here? Quietly, they realized they were free to go. Question. They, that the soldiers are driven away with Faju and Rossi, what of you? Tiwa Danjuma responds, I had to hitch a ride to go to the barracks. They left. There was no vehicle even for me to leave that place. They just drove away, taking them away. So I had to make my way back to the barracks. If you read General Gowon's book, it is there. They named names of the people who actually took Ironsi away. Now, there are a lot of lies. I read some very funny lies told by Ironsi's ADC, whose life I saved. He was an Igbo officer from Abakaliki area, tall, a good-looking chap. After the war, he came back. I saw him. We shook hands, and I gave him some money. I read his account. We captured a lot of literature in Enugu. The Igbos named his account, including what happened in Ibadan and what happened in the north, as pogrom. I read all the accounts there. It was there that I saw the evidence given by this man in order to... He must have felt guilty when his boss was arrested and taken away, and he went away and he went home empty-handed, without anything, even though he was his ADC, and nothing happened to him. By the way, I found out that ADC turned out to be... Was it Nwankwo? I think it was Andrew Nwankwo. He had to tell a lie to justify how he came out with his limbs intact. He gave a long story of how he escaped, what happened, and so on. That man told a lot of lies that gained currency. Ironsi had two ADCs. One of them was Colonel Sonny Bello, and the other was this man. I prevailed on the soldiers not to do anything to anybody. We arranged for him to escape and go away. He went home and started telling lies. He told a lot of lies, which I read in the account he gave in Biafra. We had an inquiry. People came to give account and so on and so forth. Unfortunately, I didn't keep it, but I remember that the stories that gained currency were from that man. So someone says the adjutant created the problems. He said no. He didn't create the problem. The Igbos who killed our senior officers all over the place created the problem. They created the problem. They sowed the wind and reaped the problem. It wasn't him, the adjutant. They were reacting. They were avenging what happened in January. The July coup was a revenge coup. So the person asked, what's the name of the adjutant? He says, Garba Paiko. Was he a major? Major. He was a second lieutenant. You were a senior. Oh, yes. But when it comes to coup making, there's no rank. The coup is a bandwagon of hierarchy. This was his unit. He knew the boys. I didn't know them. But he knew me. He used me. Then the person says, you were lucky. They didn't mistake you for an Igbo. Then he says, Tiwa Danjuma responds, oh, easily. I was lighter in complexion than I am now. Many times they took me for an Igbo. So the adjutant didn't create the problem. I don't think you people know what happened. What would you do when you went to bed and woke up and found out all the people from your area in the army, innocent people, were killed in their beds? Some of them even with their wives, all done by Igbo officers. We bottled up these for 6 months, from January to July. Then the opportunity came for revenge. In the army, you are taught that when you are fired upon, you take cover and return fire. We didn't return fire immediately. We gave Iransi a chance to deal with the people who killed our seniors. He did not. We couldn't understand. If politicians were corrupt, why didn't you confine yourself to killing politicians? If it was necessary that the army should take over, why was it that this same army should eliminate the cream of that army and leave us with absolutely useless people like Iransi, who was a desk clerk head of state? We couldn't understand it, but we bottled this up till July, and when the opportunity came, we decided to revenge. This is what happened. And they asked the question, people blame you for what happened in Ibadan, but as it is, the adjutant more or less instigated the soldiers. He responds, yes, this is what I suspect. My suspicion is borne out by the fact that he did not do what I would do if I were in his position. He, the adjutant, approved of what the boys did. And that's it. That was T.Y. Danjuma talking about what happened in the 2029 coup. Counter coup. All right, thank you very much. Now you know. All right, thank you very much for listening. That was IBB, Shagari, Enahoro, Ademoyega, and T.Y. Danjuma speak on the 1966 counter coup. We listened to a number of videos just now, and I hope we got some things. All right, we have someone who's trying to come up on TikTok. By the way, we'll talk more about this tomorrow, but Nnamdi Kanu has been sentenced to life imprisonment. And I think that was fitting, to be honest. I listened to the judge say that, it was going to temper justice with mercy, and was quoting the book of Matthew, quoting the words of Jesus Christ, and how on a normal day he should have been sentenced to death. But then, mercy prevailed, and it was sentenced to life imprisonment. I thought that was really, it was fitting, and hopefully others learn from this situation. Tomorrow we're going to go deep into it and talk about everything that happened during the proceedings earlier today. But we have someone on TikTok who wants to come up to speak, so I'm going to bring Timmy up. I think this will be your first time, I think. Good evening, Timmy. I've accepted your request. If you want to come, please do so. All right. So that's what we see on today, Sha. So we've listened to what happened in July. As a matter of fact, we actually have to go back a bit to understand what happened in January after Iransi took over, and then what he did in April, and what happened in May, and then what happened in July. But that's about today's session. I want to know if anybody has any questions. We can, listen to some. Let me just read some responses. I'll start with YouTube. Olagunju Emmanuel, Mr. Olagunju says, did you watch the final court? Did you watch the final court ruling in the case of Nnamdi Kanu and the federal government today? Well, to be honest, what I've always advocated for, is that they should just, sentence him however they want to do it, or whatever his prison term would be. They should just, make it clear and let's get over with it. And they've done that today. And I remember saying yesterday when some lawmakers, interestingly, wrote a letter to the president on the 18th, asking him to prevail upon the judge to withdraw the case, which is quite ridiculous as far as I'm concerned. I thought that was unnecessary. If they wanted to do that, they should have done that a long time ago. Meanwhile, the man himself showed no remorse. Even today, he was still, being very disrespectful to the judge, and it was just a mess. But at least now, after he has told the judge, you have no rights, you have nothing you cannot sentence me. You should go and ask if he can be sentenced now, or if it is clauses and paragraphs they'll give it to him and not a sentence. But I'm sure you got the joke. Anyway, so just check. If anybody wants to come up, please feel free to do so. It's a Thursday, so I'm not going to come on camera. But tomorrow, we are going to spend some time on the news and also the game show, Redomi Republic. We're going to host someone tomorrow, and we'll see if we can read a bit from the book, the last bit actually, from the book by Shagari, Beckoned to Serve. That's about it for today. So in case you join us for the first time, we have these sessions every day, every weekday, Mondays to Fridays at 4 p.m. Ife time, West African time. Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays we come on camera and do the full sessions that start at 4 and ends sometimes 8 or past 8 p.m. But Tuesdays and Thursdays we have shorter sessions, so we're going to be closing in the next few minutes. I'm just going to check if anybody has anything in the comment section. If not, we'll end the session for today, and then we'll come for a full session tomorrow. Thank you very much, Ronke Nimbe, for liking the live. I really appreciate you, ma'am. God bless you. Oh, it's a kiwale kan. So I share pe kiwani o. Show. All right, where was I? Don't check Facebook. I think we're good there. All right. So we're going to call it a day now, right? Thanks to everyone on every platform, whether you're on YouTube, on TikTok, on Facebook. Thank you very much for being part of today's session. We're going to go deeper tomorrow, Friday. By the way, let me just pull up the ad in case you want to register to be part of the game show tomorrow. Please go to this account, linktree/Redomi Republic, and there you can register to be a contestant. We'll bring you up on TikTok and you answer questions and win some cash. The questions are about Nigerian politics and history, and also Yoruba history and culture. So please send your fill the form, and then we'll get back to you. If you'd like to support us, please reach out to me on Telegram at Pusui Oris. We'll let you know how you can support what we are doing. Thank you very much. I think there's a question right now. You see why Danjuma accounts in a book? What I just read right now is, what you just listened to is actually from a book by Chuks Ilogbunam. The book is called Ironsi. And I often say that books from certain parts of Nigeria, they're full of propaganda. It's actually true. However, it's also true that you can find some good stuff there. For instance, in order to lie, you may need to quote some truth. That quote may be what I need from the book. So that book has a lot of, it's written from an Igbo perspective, and nothing that was done by the Easterners was wrong, which is crazy. Because I think, personally, if I want to talk about Yoruba politics, I can say, okay, this person was right, this person was wrong, and that's it, and then you move on, even in national context. But somehow for Igbo writers, all the politicians are perfect, but they can, dump on others. Anyway, in trying to make his point, and whatever he thought he was trying to do, he decided to quote an interview that Tiwa Danjuma had granted, right, where, was asked about the counter coup, and that was the one I read earlier. So it's from that book, Ironsi, by Chuks Ilogbunam. All right, I think that's the only question we have today. Any other questions or, addition, subtraction before we go? We're going to listen to the anthems before we go anyway. The Nigerian anthem and the Yoruba anthem. All right, I think we're good. Let's have the Nigerian anthem, and then we'll have Yoruba anthem, and then we'll call it a day. Okay.
Nigeria, we hail thee, our own dear native land. Though tribe and tongue may differ, ìṣọ̀kan àtòmìnira ni ẹ jẹ́ ká máa lépa tẹ̀síwájú fọ̀pọ̀ ire àtòhun tó dára ọmọ òkàdìdé wọ́n sípò ẹ̀tọ́ rẹ̀ ìwọ ni ìmọ́lẹ̀ ògo adúláwọ̀.
Àwa ni ìmọ́lẹ̀ ogun adúláwọ̀, ìmọ́lẹ̀ wo ni wọ́kùn lágbára Ọlọ́run, ilẹ̀ Yorùbá ò ní bàjẹ́, Nàìjíríà náà ò ní bàjẹ́, ilé wa ọ̀nà wa ẹnìkankan wa kò ní bàjẹ́ lágbára Ọlọ́run. Thank you very much for being part of today's session. Do have a lovely evening. I'll see you tomorrow at 4 p.m. 1 second, please. I'll see you at 4 p.m. Ife time, West African time. And again, if you'd like to be part of the game show tomorrow, kindly go to linktree/Freedom Republic to be part of the session, so you can be one of the contestants and you stand a chance to win cool cash prizes. All right, then, do have a lovely evening, and we'll talk about, people are already saying stuff in the comment section about what happened today. Kanu was, let me just read a few things here from YouTube. Kanu is absolutely rude. He cursed the federal government lead lawyer, Ademoyega Awomolo. He said God will punish him. I heard him say that nonsense. And then he wrote here, that boy is totally rude. They will go to appeal soon. Then I responded, yes, and then prepare for the Supreme Court. They'll be all right. Insulting the lead counsel for the government, being rash, even with the judge, telling them they can't do anything, they can't sentence him. And the judge talked about how he wasn't remorseful at all and that he took judicial notice of his actions. I hope people actually learn, Ogbon Jagbara law, Ogbon Jagbara law. All these crowds doesn't mean anything. But yeah, I hope they learn their lessons, and I hope all of us are also learning lessons. There are more sensible ways of getting your thoughts across. There are more sensible ways of agitating for what you want in Nigeria. Nigeria, you may call it a zoo, but that's because that's your perspective, and maybe you are thinking like an animal. The truth is, Nigeria is a land of laws. It's not always, things are not always done properly, but that doesn't mean things cannot be done properly. That's why we must be very careful. But we have to be wary. We have to be very careful how we move, especially on social media, because what got him in trouble, it was somebody just calling for, soldiers to be killed, policemen to be killed, Lagos to be burnt down, all this kind of nonsense. People to be unalived. Why? To flex. See what's happening in the Southeast right now. And this is I'll talk more about this tomorrow, though. One of the shameful things about all this is that those who are supporting him are mostly the ones who have been affected by these things, and they're the ones who said the federal government has not done anything for them. And now that the government is doing something for them, they are saying it's because it's Yoruba. It's just ridiculous. We'll talk more about that tomorrow. Thank you very much for being part of today's session. I'll see you at 4 p.m. Ife time, West African time. Have a great one. God bless you.